Uh, Good evening, everyone. In my presentation, I'm going to show you several high-resolution seismic sections from the İzmir Gulf, which illustrate the existence of the active fault systems and their extensions in the area. By means of structural setting, the İzmir Gulf and surrounding region is quite complex, with both interacting normal and strike-slip faults. Is actually a local area within the complex structural context of the Aegean region. The onshore extensions of the faults are known actually very well, but their offshore extensions have generally been predicted. So the seismic data here will illustrate the current active fault systems and their extensions within the Gulf. The İzmir Gulf is a shallow basin that is still being developing. The whole Gulf can be divided into three main parts. The inner Gulf, where the İzmir city center is located around. The outer Gulf, which opens into the Aegean Sea in the north, and the GÜLBAHÇE Gulf to the southwest. The maximum water depth in the inner Gulf is 20 meters, while it's approximately 65 meters in the outer Gulf. Of these, only for the outer Gulf, the extension of the active faults were mapped and tectonic models were developed. So I will mostly speak on the outer Gulf in this presentation and show you some basic seismic data examples from that area. Gulf of İzmir and the surrounding regions have been deformed by the northwest, southeast, and east-west trending fault systems. The most evident active faults are seen in the small map in the middle. They are the İzmir Fault, GÜLBAHÇE, and Tuzla Faults, and Karşıyaka Fault zones in the onshore part. Different fault models have been suggested by different researchers for the area. This slide shows the main results of some of these studies. Ocakoğlu and others suggest north to south trending strike-slip faults for the Gulf. According to Aksu and Uzal's study, the outer Gulf is characterized by northwest to southwest extending normal faults. These interpretations are based on the marine seismic data collected by Aksu and others, and provide an impression of the faults within the outer Gulf. In order to characterize the active faults in the whole offshore area, we use 3.5 kHz sharp, 5 kHz sub-bottom profiler, and 400 Hz Sparker single-channel seismic data collected in the whole Gulf. Here you see the coverage of the seismic profiles. The penetration of the chirp and sub-bottom profiler system is about 30 meters, while it's about 100 meters for the Sparker lines. We also use the multi-beam bathymetry map multi-beam bathymetry data to map the morphology and possible lineaments due to the surface expressions of the active faults. Okay, this map shows the effect of the ancient Gediz River on the outer Gulf and fluid flow structures in the area. The ancient Gediz River bed in the central part of the outer Gulf was active until the end of 1800s. Then the riverbed was moved to the outside of the Gulf. Anyway, it has a considerable effect on the formation of the present-day morphology of the outer Gulf, since it has controlled the sediment accumulation in the area. Through the northern border of the Gulf, acoustic turbidity zones, gas chimneys, and active or inactive pockmarks commonly along the fault planes exist in the seismic lines and are interpreted as biogenic gas accumulations produced in organic rich high-strength sediments from the Gediz River. Okay, let's start with the outer Gulf. To the northernmost part of the Gulf, just east of Uzunada, seismic data indicate the existence of a narrow young graben named İzmir Central Graben. The formation of this graben seems to be ongoing since it creates deformation at the seafloor. Aksu and others mapped the continuation of this graben at the end of the Gulf to the all the way north. Towards the south, the graben gets narrower and disappears at the east of Uzunada. In this region, a new identified active fault from Foça to Suzbeyli village also exists and named here as Foça-Suzbeyli Fault. The western part of this fault is the hanging wall block. Similar to the central graben, it's a very young fault that crosses the recent sediments. In addition, the apparent thickness of the sediments changed at both sides of the fault, which indicates a sign sedimentary fault pattern. It's impossible to follow this fault on land because of the swamp conditions on the surface in this area. The most prominent fault within the outer Gulf is Uzunada fault zone. Is observed as a single fault scarp at the southernmost part of the GÜLBAHÇE down here. In this region, it has a vertical slip of about 5 meters here. Then it extends towards the northwest until the Çiçek Islands here, where it splits into many segments. These segments composed of 3 fault scarps extending to the northeast of Hekim Island, and they show a left lateral slip in this location. The segmentation of fault here at the north of Uzunada around this location is important since it may indicate the clues of the fan-shaped opening of the Gulf. Uzunada fault extends to the land ground around GÜLBAHÇE, and yet there is no detailed mapping of this fault on land. This slide shows 3 sparkle seismic lines cross-cutting the Uzunada fault in the outer Gulf. It deforms the seafloor and this shallow subsurface sediments all the way down, as you see. According to the seismic data, the normal component becomes dominant towards the north around the Uzunada, where the throw rate of the fault increases towards the deeper parts. However, to the south, it exhibits strike slip characteristics such as transpiration clues, which indicates the bending of the fault. In addition, irrelevant reflective surfaces exist at both sides of the fault around the Çiçek Islands here. For instance, the regional base of the deltaic sediments in here and here cannot be peaked at the left side of the fault. These observations may indicate a significant strike slip component for this fault in this region. In the southern offshore, the İzmir fault is the only fault traced in this study parallel to the shoreline, extending in this direction. İzmir fault was considered as a wide fault zone in the onshore part of the Gulf. According to the seismic data, İzmir fault is extending in the offshore as a single normal fault at the western part of Balçova. Offshore length of this fault is about 10 kilometers, and it cannot be followed after GÜLBAHÇE towards the west. it finishes here somewhere. Okay, this is the main fault map of the outer Gulf, showing the extensions of the faults deduced from the seismic data. It shows the Uzunada fault zone, İzmir fault here, İzmir Central Graben, as well as Foça-Suzbeyli fault to the northeast. Both Uzunada and İzmir faults are quite distinct in the multi-beam bathymetry map of the other Gulf as a prominent lineaments. Both faults are the most critical active faults close to the urban area of the İzmir city, yet they are not evident in the onshore region, except limited onshore extension of İzmir fault zone to this south here. The Uzunada fault zone indicates the complex opening mechanism of the Gulf. Along the İzmir Central Graben and Foça-Suzbeyli fault, it seems to control the extension of the outer Gulf. The strike of İzmir fault is completely in east and west direction, in contrast to all recognized other faults. Okay, when we come to the GÜLBAHÇE Gulf, the things are getting quite complicated. This slide shows 3 chart seismic profiles from GÜLBAHÇE Gulf. The faults here show quite complicated, and they contain significant strike slip faults, faults with dominance, normal components, and possible transpiration clues within the sediments, which are all observed within a relatively small zone of interest. The faults of the GÜLBAHÇE Gulf on land section is actually very well known. However, the faults within the offshore is generally indicated as a single fault, especially towards the northern part. But the fault structure of the GÜLBAHÇE Gulf, especially at its northernmost part, is quite complicated and needs further investigation. Here we only map the fault traces using their surface expressions on the multi-beam bathymetric map. The distance between the parallel seismic lines here in GÜLBAHÇE Gulf is only 200 meters, but structure also changed from one seismic line to another, making the mapping of the faults almost impossible, especially for the northern part. To the south, however, the structure becomes more simple, as you see in the seismic line at the bottom. Inner Gulf is investigated with single-channel sparker lines. The seismic data from the southern margin of the Gulf, Inner Gulf, indicate normal faults with hanging wall block towards the basinal area to the north. The troughs of these faults are relatively small, and they show the clues of a geometry like a half graben structure. Here we see shallow gas accumulations at the northern part of the Inner Gulf, and we cannot map the faults in this region. However, there exist several faults typically affecting the erosional base reflection of the thick Holocene sediments in the central basin. In this part of the Gulf, fault seems not to create deformation at the seafloor, and there is no lineaments on the multi-beam bathymetric data attributable to a fault trace. However, the inner Gulf needs further investigation by means of a denser seismic grid to map the faults in detail. In order to summarize, we can conclude that the western margin and the southern part of the Gulf formed under the influence of Uzunada and İzmir faults. In the southern offshore, there is only one east-west directional normal fault, dipping through the north and corresponding to the offshore segment of the İzmir fault zone. We see from the local seismicity map that the majority of the earthquake magnitudes in the İzmir Gulf are generally less than 4, and the zone along the northern Uzunada fault, Foça-Suzveyli fault, and the İzmir central Graben show a significant earthquake activity. Dr. Onur Tan actually mentioned the seismicity of the area in detail in his previous talk. The acoustic data show that Uzunada fault zone is a simple lineament near GÜLBAHÇE to the south. It then bifurcates towards the Çiçek Islands and terminates with left lateral slip in the east of Hekim Island here. Then the fault extends in the northwest direction until the mid of Uzunada as a single fault segment again. Then the fault is observed as a bunch of many active fault segments, like horsetail splays to the east of Uzunada. İzmir fault also controls the northern extension of Seferihisar and Tuzla fault zones to the south, because they all terminate at the intersection points on İzmir fault and cannot be traced further north from the İzmir fault zone. In accordance with the extensional tectonic regime of the Western Anatolia, main faults could be considered as a normal faults with strike slip components because of this transtensional characteristics. The end of each fault segment is characterized by the horsetail splays in the Gulf. In addition, extension of these faults was controlled by the northeast-southwest directional tier faults to compensate the rotational movements within the Gulf. Okay, this is a hypothetical model for the area. The fault segments here, though, were chronologically succeeded from the east to the west. So this pattern indicates a westward extension of the İzmir Gulf with an anti-clockwise rotation, while the Karaburun Peninsula is rotating the clockwise direction. This pattern explains why the GÜLBAHÇE fault zone is a right lateral strike slip fault. Similarly, the region to the south of İzmir rotates in the clockwise system, in contrast to anti-clockwise direction of the İzmir Gulf. This is the reason of dextral strike slip characteristic of Orhanlı or Tuzla fault zones. According to the relative GPS velocity field, fan shape extension within the Gulf is more rapid than the surrounding area. This also explains the horsetail place of Uzunada fault zone and why the İzmir central Graben starts from the eastern offshore of Uzunada. From the eastern part of the Hekim Island. Extension of Uzunada fault zone and İzmir central Graben are almost parallel to each other, and they are almost normal to the local GPS vectors. And this is another indicator of ongoing westwards opening of the Gulf. Additionally, a new fault extending from the offshore of Foça to Suzveyli village to the south was identified. It shows the clues of a sedimentary normal fault related to the opening of the Gulf. The onshore faults are mainly the northeast, southwest direction. However, Uzunada fault zone, İzmir central Graben, and Foça-Suzveyli fault extend angular to these trends in the outer Gulf. This may also indicate the active V-shaped opening of the İzmir Gulf through the north and northwest. These are the main conclusions of this study. The outer Gulf has active faults, mainly extending in northwest to southeast direction, named Uzunada Fault, İzmir Central Graben, Foça Suzveli Fault, and İzmir Fault. Especially Uzunada and İzmir faults are significant in the bathymetric map based on the active faults of the Gulf. Outer Gulf seems to be opening westwards and rotates counterclockwise direction. Outer part of the GÜLBAHÇE Gulf is quite complex by means of structural setting. It contains strike-slip faulting interrelated with transpirational structures and needs further investigation to obtain the tectonic setting and its connection to with the faults on land and in the outer Gulf. The faults of the inner Gulf are all buried beneath the Holocene. We obviously need more data to define the faults of the inner Gulf and their interconnections with the surrounding faults observed on land. The deep seismic data from the İzmir Gulf is quite limited to define the deeper setting and stratigraphy. The only deep seismic data is collected by MTA in 1996, I guess, and interpreted by Ocakoğlu and others. It's suggested that the deep multi-channel seismic data along the outer Gulf can provide valuable information about the structure of the Gulf. The active faults of the Gulf should be taken into consideration in the preparation of the earthquake master plan of the city, with a possible connection with the local seismicity. I think that's all. I thank you for your listening and participation.